2024 is already loaded with so many awesome RPGs that we get to play this year, so I want to talk about 10 that I am so pumped to get to. That is, if I have time to play all of these amazing RPGs. Why do I have to be an RPG fan? And if I don't get to something you're excited about, let me know in the comment section below. I'll probably check it out. To kick us off, we have Persona 3 Reload. I've been playing Persona games for a while now, and it is one of my favorite RPG franchises of all time. But Persona 3 is kind of a weird one for me. I didn't really get into Persona till, well, after Persona 4 Golden, and it was just shortly before Persona 5 came out. I remember going to this local GameStop where we used to live and chatting with one of the employees who was incredibly knowledgeable about RPGs. Honestly, I would go to that GameStop sometimes just to talk to this guy. When he heard that I had recently rebought a PlayStation Vita after having to sell mine a while back to make rent, long story, he emphatically recommended that I get Persona 4 Golden, since it was his favorite game of all time. And I went back and forth on it for a few months until I finally decided to pull the trigger. See what I did there? And Persona 4 Golden is now also one of my favorite games of all time, if not my favorite game of all time. And after beating it, I was super interested in the franchise in general. But I had other games to play at the time, as well as the upcoming Persona 5. So what did I do with Persona 3? I watched the anime. Since then, I've bought it multiple times on the Vita, on the Switch, but I still haven't actually started the game. And then Persona 3 Reload was announced, and that's really all the excuse I need. If you're not familiar with Persona 3, it's one of the darker of the most recent Persona games that revolves around the main protagonist, canonically known as Makoto Yuki, who is a transfer student to a new high school where he gets wrapped up in the mystery of the Dark Hour, a time between one day and the next when shadows come out and kill people. The main character groups up with the specialized extracurricular execution squad known as C's to use their newfound persona abilities to stop the Dark Hour and unravel all of the mysteries of this giant tower called Tartarus, where they need to ascend to the top and stop all of these shadows. Just like the other modern Persona games, this game straddles some of those life sim elements. You're going to school, you're hanging out with friends, it's all on a timeline based on a calendar, and you really hone in on building these bonds with other characters with this intense story of self-discovery, reflection, and death. And somehow these games pull this off brilliantly. And it looks like for this remake, they basically took the aesthetic from Persona 5 and contextualized it for Persona 3, which is incredibly stylish and awesome, and I love what Atlus is doing with these games. Now, this is the base story for the game. There were other remasters that came out that added characters and events that won't be a part of this game. So for example, if we were talking Persona 5 terms, this would be Persona 5 rather than Persona 5 Royal. But I'm still super excited. This game looks incredible, and it looks like they took a lot of the clunkiness out of the original, so this looks like the perfect way to experience this game. And I totally knew this was coming, so I waited on purpose. This game comes out February 2nd, so very soon, and I hope it's a runaway hit, because do you know what that could mean? Well, besides an awesome experience in and of itself, Persona 4 Golden, baby! Let's make it happen, Atlus! Next up, to nobody's surprise, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Final Fantasy is one of my favorite franchises of all time, with 8 being credited for my introduction to the series, and I loved it. I don't care what you think. And 7 was, of course, the super iconic game, and is one of my favorites. I'll have a video on my ranked list of Final Fantasy games at some point, so subscribe if you want to see that. Remake did the unexpected for me. Without spoiling anything, though this new game's existence already kinda does that, Final Fantasy VII Remake simultaneously delivers a full remake of Final Fantasy VII while preserving the value of the original. If you love Final Fantasy, you should play these games. The term remake is far more clever than one might assume. And the title Rebirth probably has a lot more depth than we might assume as well. This game looks like they're just going in on all of the madness. The party will go out of Midgard with their fates unwritten, so it looks like we're looking in multiple timelines, the return of characters that should be dead, as well as the introduction of some old favorites like Cid and Vincent. Georgia Cerberus Remake, baby! Red 13 and Yuffie are part of the group, and I'm sure there will be many more surprises. The setting for this game, based on the original, is where you get a lot of the meat of the story. The world will open up after the events of Midgard, through story from Cosmo Canyon, a personal favorite, Nibelheim, where you originally learn more of Sephiroth, and will probably meet my boy Vincent, that beautiful vampire man, and the Golden Saucer, where all kinds of fun is had. In the original, you could go on a date there with some hilarious scenes between characters like Cloud and Barrett if you played it right. Since this, like Remake, will be chapter-based, I'm sure there will be all kinds of story variants and events you'll be able to check out. And finally, the story will culminate in the Forgotten Capital from the original Final Fantasy VII, because they need to make a third one, so you'll end up playing 3 games. Smart move to deal with the ballooning AAA budget, Square. And yet, what do I say about being the problem? Now, where's that collector's edition? And of course, this game will have the more action RPG-like mechanics, but honestly, I love what they did with Remake. And this looks even better. Assuming they'll just be building on it, the battle style feels like a perfect culmination of the old Final Fantasy strategic thinking with new action mechanics. Something I'd like to see them take with them into Final Fantasy XVII, as much as I personally love 16. And this game is going to be on 2 discs. Man, I'm just ready for this one. The characters, the overworld, riding chocobos, new versions of classic scenes, crazy timeline shenanigans, and I haven't even mentioned the music. Oh man, if this is anything like Remake, I'm going to be weeping like a baby hearing some of these tracks. They did an incredible job with the Remake soundtrack. This game comes out February 29th, and it may be one of my most anticipated, even though every game on this list has me hyped. Next up, we have Granblue Fantasy Relink. And admittedly, this is my first foray into this series in general. I have some friends who are super into these games, but I've never really given it a second glance because most of the games were mobile. But the new trailer shown off at Gamescom last year really caught my eye, and everything else that's come out since then has been really awesome. Apparently this one was having development issues for some time as it was delayed a number of times, but they seem to have pulled it together to create something genuinely compelling. The setting for this game is in the Sky Islands of Zegagrand, forgive me if I'm saying any of these things wrong, where there is the threat of these massive astral beasts destroying everything. From what I can gather from the trailers, the main antagonist seems to be a character named Lilith, and the Pilgrims of Avia, a group set on following Lilith to a utopia called Estalucia. The main character, on the other hand, has their fate entwined with a mysterious girl named Lyria, who has the power to control the astral beasts. Lyria was held captive by the Empire, and another main character, Catalina, engineered her escape, where the main protagonist meets them, gets fatally wounded, and is bound to Lyria as she uses her special powers to save him by linking her life force to his. From there, of course, you meet a colorful cast of characters and adventure to take on the threat to the world. As far as mechanics go, this game seems to take a lot of the best from the RPG genre. Each character can equip specific equipment and sigils that will have different skills that can be learned and their own talent trees, with 4 party members active at one time. During battle, there's a gauge that fills up to unleash party link attacks to slow down enemy attacks, dish out more damage, as well as chain bursts, which look a little bit like limit breaks from the Final Fantasy games, and you can inflict large amounts of damage. And they'll have a bunch of side quests to boot that can be tackled online with other players as well. Altogether, this sounds like a blast, and this game gives me some serious Final Fantasy vibes that have me really excited. Some of the music in the trailers are awfully close to some of the themes from Final Fantasy VIII, for example. You have giant bosses and summons, one of which is literally called Bahamut. I mean, I suppose other elements are just classic fantasy RPG tropes with beautiful environments, fantasy weaponry, the characters, each with different pros and cons that can be strategically combined to obliterate unreasonably massive monsters and over-the-top villains, but I love this kind of stuff. This is another day one for me on February 1st, right before Persona 3 Reload and Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. And I thought 2023 was bad. And while I was recording this, they dropped the demo for this game, and it is so good. Aw yeah, baby. The battle system took me a minute to get used to, and there's probably still some things I need to figure out, but the combos, the link and special attacks were visually stunning, and they were so satisfying to pull off. I tried some of the online play as well, and it worked seamlessly. And confession time, I tried the whole thing out on the PlayStation Portal, and it ran really well. There was an update for this, so I might have to do a video where I do a full test with this versus something like Chiaki on the Steam Deck and see if it holds up now. But if you haven't checked out the demo, definitely check it out. It's really good. Anyway, I think this one is going to do really well, and I hope it does because I'd love to see more like this. Next up, Unicorn Overlord. This one honestly came as a surprise to me. Atlas and Vanillaware bringing us what they're calling the rebirth of the tactical fantasy RPG. Those are some strong words, Atlas, but I'm here for it. I'm a huge fan of the Final Fantasy Tactics games. Obviously, I love Fire Emblem, as well as more of the modern takes on tactical RPGs like Triangle Strategy. Love that game. So seeing this combo come coming in and taking a crack at this is very exciting to me. The story revolves around Eiyuden, the crown prince of a fallen kingdom of Cornea. Eiyuden fled with a loyal knight, Joseph, at the queen's request, and Joseph has worked to train Eiyuden in the sword and strategy until about the age of 17, and has been building a liberation army to liberate FFVIII. I have no idea if I'm saying any of these names right. The fallen prince returns with the unicorn ring of legend, ancestral treasure of the fallen kingdom, to purify evil. Unlike many other tactical RPGs, you can traverse the world to gather new allies. What that means exactly is unclear, but it looks as if there will be towns, characters, and other locations you can visit between or perhaps during battles. You'll be able to recruit 60 unique characters to build your army, but it also looks like the units will be able to promote or change class in some way, kind of like Fire Emblem. The trailer shows some side tasks you can perform in the game as well, such as what looks like side quests in different locations where you can gather renown, cooking some tasty food, and digging for items and treasure, as well as a coliseum where you can battle offline, online, and exchange currency for prizes. This game looks packed with all of this, and I'm so excited to see more tactical RPGs. The resurgence over the last few years has been amazing. Now, this game looks like they took elements from all of my favorite tactical RPGs and meshed them together. So for example, in the unit customization menu, it looks super similar to Final Fantasy Tactics, but instead of choosing characters to use during battle, you have entire groups or units. Battle animation looks a lot like Fire Emblem if there were more characters on screen. Even the animations look similar. And you, of course, have different types of allies like angels, beastals, humans, and elves that have different class types. It really does feel like they're trying to take lessons learned from all of these other amazing games and innovate on them. Unicorn Overlord releases March 8th, and I'm really hoping this one's a winner because I'm all in once I'm done with those other games, of course. Next up is Eiyuden Chronicles 100 Heroes. Eiyuden Chronicles is essentially a spiritual successor to the Suikoden series, with some heavy influence from Suikoden 2, which is largely considered one of the best in the entire franchise. Except for that one guy in the comments, it's like, Suikoden 3 is the best of all time! This game is being developed by Rabbit and Bear Studios, a dev team comprised of many of the original Suikoden team. I backed this game when a Kickstarter launched back in 2020, and I've been waiting with great anticipation for its release. When the Kickstarter launched, I was hungry for another Suikoden experience. I even ran through Suikoden 1 and 2 again back on the Vita after I backed this game. They take an inspiration from the HD 2D style that we've seen from Square Enix that give us that modern retro aesthetic, and I'm totally here for it. And they maintained the Stars of Destiny idea from Suikoden by having 100 heroes that you can recruit. That's even in the name. Eiyuden Chronicles is set in the world of Alran, a land of many different nations and peoples, including shark people, because why not? Where rune lenses are a source of conflict as they bestow power. The story follows 3 heroes: Noah, a passionate and headstrong guard from a remote village who dives headfirst into conflict. Anybody else think Noah looks like Xeon from Nintendo Life? Just me? Sane, a gifted and visionary Imperial officer who has his own ambitions and dreams. Not Joey. And Marissa, a guardian of the Rune Barrows, where power is sought by the Empire, trying to amplify and expand their power even further. Noah's town gets burned down as part of a larger conspiracy, and after meeting, the characters go on this adventure to discover the truth of the runes and stop the threat of the Empire, recruiting over 100 heroes along the way who will have their own stories, ambitions, and convictions, etc. Basically your classic Suikoden setup. You'll have a party of up to 6 characters, with every character wielding unique skills. Greater bonds between the characters will also allow for hero combos, and these battles will also include these really unique terrain effects, such as having the high ground or hiding between rocks. War mode also makes a return, with characters commanding legions during larger conflicts between nations, including unique conversations between characters and adversaries based on past experiences, context, etc. So that's a pretty cool addition to help make the world feel a little bit more alive. And finally, you'll have your classic headquarters for the Alliance that start as a dump and eventually expanded to a town full of items, services, and fun minigames. Like I talked about in this video, Suikoden 5 really drew me into this series, and the combination of turn-based battles, all-out wars, and town building made these games super unique and fun. So having a continuation of this format after all of these years is super exciting. Speaking of Suikoden, I also want to mention that Konami is releasing the Suikoden 1 and 2 remaster this year as well, which I'm also also very excited about, but I wanted to highlight this one instead. If you haven't played those classics, absolutely pick that one up and play through them. They're amazing, and you know I'm gonna pick it up. That being said, Konami is acting a little bit fishy with the way they've announced this. They've delayed it all around the same time as this game. It's almost like they're trying to overshadow this release. Where's my tinfoil hat? Eiyuden Chronicle 100 Heroes comes out on April 23rd, so check it out if you haven't. Oh, and they did come out with a prequel to this game already. It's called Eiyuden Chronicle Rising. It's not bad. Certainly interesting if you're gearing up for this game, but it's a short, side-scrolling RPG that introduces some of the concepts of the world, as well as some of the specific characters who will be in this game. So if you're interested in getting a head start, you should go check it out. And now for games we don't have release for, but I'm still super pumped about in 2024. Starting with Dragon Quest III HD 2D Remake. Now, admittedly, this one is more of an educated guess rather than a definitive release timeline for 2024, but I'm gonna put it here all the same. Square Enix announced this remake back in 2021 with little else to show for it since then, other than a few interviews, but those interviews seem to indicate that this game will be ready by 2024, which may mean we see a release or an announcement at the very least. In August of 2023, Yuji Horii talked about the game progressing steadily, and then in December, he came out with an update stating he was playtesting the Dragon Quest III remake until 10 p.m. Now, the game is already available as an enhanced port, so if you can't wait, I'd just say go check it out. But this will be a full-blown HD 2D remake, presumably with the music enhancements and everything. Last time I played Dragon Quest III was back in the day when it was still called Dragon Warrior 3 on the Game Boy Color, and I absolutely loved it. It may have actually been the first RPG I ever played, but it's been a long time, and getting a chance to go back with the new art style is really exciting. If you're unfamiliar with the Dragon Quest games, these are some classic RPGs, and Dragon Quest III is one that often gets overlooked, especially in the West. This is the final game in what's known as the Erdrick trilogy, though chronologically, this is the first story as it tells the origin story of our hero, who goes on a quest to defeat the archfiend Baramos, who defeated their father, the legendary Ortega. From there, the story follows needing to adventure, find a bunch of keys and orbs to revive a legendary creature to take on the baddies. Classic Dragon Quest stuff. And this game was the first in the series to get away from the plot-driven party members to recruitable allies and a vocation system where you could choose vocations and change them upon reaching level 20. There are your classic fighters, wizards, thieves, etc., but there are also some interesting classes like the Jester, who has a high luck stat and can avoid things like debuffs more easily. Even though this game is accessible and has been re-released several times, I'm a sucker for the HD 2D art style. It is so good, one of the best modern takes, in my opinion, precisely because it can revitalize some of these old games in a way that feels nostalgic yet modern. And I'm sure there will also be a number of features that have yet to be shown, since both the Super Nintendo version and the Game Boy Color version remakes had a number of features and updates added, which means this will be the definitive way to play the game. And I really hope people buy and play this because I love the direction of Square Enix here. In my opinion, if you want remakes of classics like Chrono Trigger and Final Fantasy VI, I think the HD 2D art style is the way to go. With a bunch of quality of life features, new content, maybe we'll even get voice acting. That would be super interesting, and I'd love to see more of this. Next up is Paper Mario: The Thousand-Year Door. I completely missed the Paper Mario series growing up. As I got older, I sort of tinkered with Super Mario RPG, but I never fully committed to beating it and starting in on the Paper Mario or the Mario and Luigi games. I know, I'm missing so much, but this is why I love remakes. I know Thousand Year Door is widely considered the best in the franchise, and now I don't need to go dig it up and buy an old copy to play it. I can plop it into the Switch and play it on the toilet, because that's what heroes do. The visual enhancements they've shown off so far in the trailers look absolutely amazing for this game. I've always been impressed by the aesthetic of the Paper Mario games, but wow. The story of this game revolves around Mario saving Princess Peach from being kidnapped. What? That never happens! And collecting the 7 crystal stars to unlock the legendary treasure of the titular Thousand-Year Door. From what I've looked into, this game expanded on the battle system from the Paper Mario series by introducing features like the ability to block all damage through super guarding, and partner characters having their own health pool instead of it just being Mario. In addition to this, battles are done in front of an audience who can help or hinder the player, making things much more interesting. And outside of battle, Mario has the ability to fold into different paper forms for exploration and solving puzzles. Finally, between each chapter, you assume the role of Peach and apparently Bowser. Woohoo! More Bowser! I loved Bowser in Super Mario RPG. And they have some sort of side stories that contribute to the overall story. I have no idea what all this is about, but I am pumped to play this for the first time. And coming off of the Super Mario RPG train, I'm all in on exploring this series. A friend of mine just said that I need to check out Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga, which is on Nintendo Switch Online, so I suppose I could take a look there as well. I imagine the humor, the gameplay, characters, etc. all carry the same torch of clever silliness and fun that I experienced in Super Mario RPG, and I'm always down for a lighthearted RPG. I think this one will do incredibly well when it comes out because there is a lot of hype from old and new fans. Nintendo seems to be testing the waters here for some of these. I know Origami King wasn't a game that garnered a ton of praise, so maybe Super Mario RPG and Thousand Year Door remakes are Nintendo's way of seeing if they should pursue these mechanics again. Who knows? The release date for this one is still TBD in 2024. Next up, Final Fantasy XIV Dawntrail. Holy smokes, my friends. I'll say this here and probably again at some point in a future video. Final Fantasy XIV is absolutely incredible. It is one of the most Final Fantasy of Final Fantasy games that you can possibly play, and it always has me coming back. Though usually what happens is a new expansion comes out, like this, and I need to go beat the previous one to play the new one. And by the time that happens, a new game comes out and it takes me away from 14, and the cycle continues. But not this time. Maybe. The storyline of this game is so good, and the characters are super compelling. Each expansion is basically its own game, and a while back they even implemented a system where you can go through the story in the dungeons with the main characters from the game, instead of doing it live with people, effectively creating a single player experience. Which is fantastic, by the way, because some of the older content is way more playable now. So before I even talk about this expansion, if you have any interest to get into this game, I would highly recommend it. Heavensward and Shadowbringers in particular were incredible, especially the music. You will love this world and these characters. Anyway, Dawntrail is the first major expansion after the conclusion of the main story arc, starting with A Realm Reborn and ending in the Endwalker expansion, which means this is the beginning of a whole new ride. Honestly, I have no idea where they can go from Endwalker, but I will not say no to more 14 content. With the conclusion of the Hydaelyn and Zodiac arcs, the Warriors of Light are invited to a new world where they're asked to participate in a rite of succession to determine the new land's next ruler. This new world is west of Eorzea, which is the main setting of the first arc, most of the time anyway, called Yak-Toral, where the peoples live alongside nature and there's very little industrialization. During their travels, Yoshi P, the director, said that the contest may lead them to the fabled gates of the City of Gold, which is pretty exciting. And in addition to this super exciting story hook, they'll be adding a bunch of new features. As per the usual, there will of course be new dungeons, gears, raids, etc. But what I'm most excited about, the new classes. I am a DPS nut in this game. My friends always make fun of me because I never take on healing or tanking, so I always have the easy job. Hey, and to be fair to me, I tried taking on tanking when they came out with the Gunbreaker class, since it basically made you Squall from Final Fantasy VIII, but I always go back to DPS. First it was Monk, then it was Ninja, then it was Samurai, and now they have a new Viper class, which is basically a dual blader. And that is my favorite RPG class in general. Ninja was close with the daggers, but Viper looks like my dream job in this game. So this one is gonna be a blast. For all my fellow 14 fans out there, it's not much longer as we'll be seeing this one roll out in summer of 2024. Next up is Visions of Mana. This game was an absolutely unexpected treat of the Game Awards. One of like 3. Totally worth sitting there for 4 hours, right? Visions of Mana is the first game in the series in over 15 years. Look, I am a sucker for remasters and remakes bringing old games back, but this is absolutely what I hope comes of it. Square brought back the Mana series, tested the waters, and decided it was time to go all in on a new game, and this game looks gorgeous. One of the things that stood out to me about this trailer is that it looks perfect as a 3D representation of The Secret of Mana, which is the game I'm most familiar with since I played it several times. Fear of the Heavens, anyone? I was that kid who would start the game on the Super Nintendo and just let the song play. Oh, and the remake version of that song is so good. But I digress. This game introduces a new protagonist, Val, who is chosen as a guard for a childhood friend. His friend has been chosen as the quote-unquote Alm of Fire. I'm sure we'll find out more about this later on. And her pilgrimage is to go to the Tree of Mana to rejuvenate the mana flow. That's about all we know about the story so far, but the trailer shows off some impressive visuals, this beautiful aesthetic, and an action RPG combat system, which I guess you should expect. It looks like we'll be getting a multi-party system as well, so it'll be really cool to get more details on that once they come out. I love franchise revivals like this, where the developers are clearly demonstrating a care for what made the original game so beloved. This game looks like it's going to hit that retro modern sweet spot as well. And if you want to catch up on the series, guess what? You have the ports and remasters with the Collection of Mana, as well as the Trials of Mana, as well as the Secret of Mana remake. So if you really want to scratch that mana itch, you can. See, are ports and remakes great in combination with revivals? It's the perfect blend. I'm hoping this one sells really well so we can keep this Mana franchise alive when it comes out sometime in 2024. And finally, we have Metaphor ReFantazio. This game was originally announced under the codename Project ReFantasy back in December of 2016, when Studio Zero was created from some of the team that brought us some of the modern Persona games like Persona 3, 4, and 5. These are the guys that opened up the world of Atlas for me. And this game looks wild. Bring on the not Persona games, baby. I love to see teams that brought us some of the existing masterpieces, bringing us something new and unique like this. Metaphor ReFantazio is set in a fantasy world that mirrors the real world, similar to what we've seen with Shin Megami Tensei and the Persona games. The main setting is a kingdom where the king has been killed, which kicks off this competition to see who will take over as the next king. In this world, magic is something that used to spring from the imagination of the wielder, but over time people have become more reliant on tools that allow them to conjure magic, introducing a number of restrictions, which tells me our protagonist is gonna figure out the old ways and become an epic powerhouse of awesomeness, right? The main characters are able to transform into archetypes, which are these like medieval Gundam-like giant mechs. But instead of guns, they have swords, polearms, axes, and this ability comes through an awakening that stems from the inspiration and bonds between the characters, which means we'll have a Persona-like social element. Anyway, during the election magic cast upon the world, that's how it's described by the developers, whatever that means, anyone can become king if they become the most popular, which will of course lead to all kinds of outrageous promises, tensions, battles, etc. Those in power frame this election as a competition so that they can hold on to the power that they currently hold. So we're in for some political insanity, my friends. The main character is swept up in this competition and must travel to the world to gather support, which will introduce all kinds of new locations, environments, enemies, etc. And taking inspiration from the Persona progression system through semesters of a school year, the developers also framed this journey through the lens of travel that is limited by the time you have, which will add impact to the decisions you make along your journey. Now, one of the highlights for this new game for me is the battle system. You'll be able to make the determination of whether or not an enemy is stronger than you, requiring more of that Persona-like turn-based combat, or if you simply want to defeat weaker enemies on the field, you're going to have an action RPG type system. So this will allow you to focus on battles that take time, that require strategy and thought, and not waste time on lower level, less interesting enemies. And this is a really interesting blend of the action and the turn-based. Otherwise, this game maintains this sense of style that we got from Persona 5, but it's contextualized into more of a fantasy-like aesthetic. And this one is looking real good. Anyway, I hope this one is a smash hit when it releases in fall of 2024. Assuming it'll be as good as it looks, high sales for unique games like this can encourage developers to keep taking these risks with new IPs. But before we go, there are some honorable mentions of games that I'm excited about in general, but some of them are not RPGs, and some of them, honestly, I don't know if I'm going to end up prioritizing. As well as some rumors that I'm not super confident about, but they would be amazing if they came out in 2024. So first, let's talk about some of the games we know are coming. First up is Sandland. I have no idea what this IP is, but it kind of reminds me of Blue Dragon on steroids because of the Tori Toriyama aesthetic, so I'm super interested, and it didn't take much to get me excited for this one. Next up, Princess Peach Showtime. This game looks incredible, and I'm super excited to see Nintendo taking a crack at another character in the Mario series. I know we had Super Princess Peach on the DS, so I love to see this, and I hope it sticks around kind of like Luigi's Mansion has. Apollo Justice Ace Attorney Trilogy. I missed the Apollo Justice series back on the 3DS, and I love that we're basically going to have the entire series on the Switch. The Legend of Legacy HD Remastered. If you missed this on the 3DS, it's super exciting to see this returning. I wouldn't call this a 10 out of 10 game for me, but I really enjoyed my time playing this game on the 3DS, and I love that it's not going to die there. It's kind of a Saga style game where leveling up happens with skills and stats. It's got a fun story and a super cool aesthetic. The Legend of Heroes Trails Through Daybreak. A fresh start. I still have all of the Trails in the Sky through the Cold Steel series, and I really want to play through all of them, but I feel like I need an absolutely dead year to commit to playing through all of those games. One of these days, though, I'll get through it all, but in the meantime, this is a new arc, and I'm super excited about it. As a side note, I started Trails of Cold Steel several years ago, and my save data got deleted, so that was devastating. And finally, for the games that we don't know for sure are coming in 2024, but there have been some rumors. Dragon Quest XII. There is a slight possibility that we can see this in 2024, but my guess is that we'll see another trailer for this, or rather, an actual trailer for this, and an announcement for something like 2025 or beyond. Either way, I'm super excited to see more Dragon Quest after Dragon Quest XI's was one of my favorite games on the Switch. Fire Emblem 4 Genealogy of the Holy War. I am most excited about this game because you can basically only play it using fan translations and emulation, and I haven't actually tried that yet, so knowing that it's possible we can get this completely remade with whatever updates that would include is super exciting. I am a huge fan of the Fire Emblem series, if you haven't already figured that out. And finally, Zelda, Twilight Princess, and Wind Waker. I'm also a huge fan of the Zelda series, and Wind Waker is probably one of my favorite games. Twilight Princess is also one I really enjoyed, so seeing those remade and available on the Switch, also super exciting. And there we have it. But let me know what you guys are excited about and what games you're looking forward to playing in 2024. Announced or not, like the Nintendo Switch 2, am I right? Subscribe down below. See ya!